So in this video, we're going to have a look at what is a job quote request, how does that differ from the estimate quote request. We'll have a look at the flow or intended usage, and then we're going to go through two main examples. One where there was a budget set for the item that we're quote requesting, and one where there was not. So first of all, to explain the job quote request and then how it differs from the estimate equivalent, let's go into a Buildxact account. And you will notice that up at the top, I've got an estimate and a job tied together. And in both, I've got a quote request tab. So in the job area, alongside things like purchase ordering and client invoicing, there's the quote request tab here. And then back in the estimate, I've got the quote request tab here as well. So how do these two differ? Well, first of all, the main difference is just a timing thing. So if you're doing a quote request as part of your estimate costing, you're doing that because you're trying to find out the cost of something from a supplier or contractor to fit into your initial budget, which then makes your quote to your client. That then makes the contract price, and hence really this could be summarized as saying you're requesting a price pre-contract. On the other hand, the quote request in the job phase, this is post-contract, or this is after the build has started. So you might use it to tighten up prices, or you might need to get a quote on something you'd forgotten. But largely the difference is just when it happens. Now this video is focusing pretty much solely on the job side of things. There is another video that covers the estimate quote requests entirely. And if you have no idea about quote requests, this is kind of the first thing you've ever heard about them, I would actually suggest you start with the estimate quote requests, simply because that will cover a lot of the fundamentals as well. All right, so let's have a look at the basic flow of one of these quote requests. Probably the hardest part of explaining this within the context of the job is that there are so many different scenarios that you might use it in. So what I'm going to do is explain all the different ways it might be used, and what I'm wanting to happen is for you, the user, to go, yep, great, that's the way we run our business, this is the scenario we'll work with, and this is exactly how we'll take it on board for us. The biggest decision, or the biggest factor when you're starting a quote request is, did this item have a budget to begin with? So the scenario here for, say, existing budget might be something like joinery. You've got a budget in the quote with the client for $10,000. You then want to revise that price because maybe it was an allowance item, or maybe you actually just want to tighten the price up yourself. So you're going to quote request and pick a winner. On the other hand, if there's no existing budget, this might be because you didn't allow for it in the first place, or it's something the client has later decided they want, and we can quote request in this scenario too. It just changes where we start from in Buildxact. Once you choose the quote request, the process from here is kind of up to you. So you've chosen the quote request winner. The question here is, what comes next? Do you variation to the client and get everything properly paperworked and official? If you variation it and then the client accepts it, that's obviously going to change your contract value. You can then send a purchase order and receive the expense as the work actually occurs. Or on the other hand, you might make a choice where, hey, look, this is a small item, we're actually going to make the purchase first. So we're going to choose the quote request winner and send a purchase order, which is optional. You don't have to send the order. You can jump straight to just receiving the order and inputting that expense. And after that, there may be scenarios where you will then variation that back to the client in the case of, say, an allowance. But there's also cases where you've done the quote request because you missed something and the client is actually not incurring that cost. So again, the process is very fluid based on what's happening. And I think probably the biggest single tip here is when you're going through this yourself, try and think very logically about, well, what would I normally do? Would I variation this to the client? Is the client going to incur the cost? And this will dictate what you do in Buildxact. As for my examples, I'm going to go through two examples here. One is I'm going to start from something with a budget, in my case, joinery. I'm going to do a quick quote request. I'm going to do the variation, and then I'm going to show you how I would then purchase that item. The second example I will go through will be where there is no budget set. This will be a landscaping example, and I will then go through, do the quote request, and pop it through to be a variation for the client to get them to approve that landscaping cost. So the first one, joinery. I'm in the actual costing section of my job. There is a budget here for $10,000 and it's an allowance. Client's gone and made some selections and basically chosen the items they want. I'm going to now request the new price from the supplier. So I'm going to grab and quote request. The rule of thumb that we've talked about in other videos, specifically like purchase ordering and variations, where if there's an actual cost item, you can grab and start from the buttons down the bottom. Still true for quote requests. Versus, you'll see in my landscaping example in a tick, where there is no line, I'm actually going to go into quote requests and start the new request from there. But if the line exists, absolutely grab it, quote request it, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to fly through this one a little quick, simply because this is more about using quote requests in the jobs and less about the intricate details of quote requests themselves. I'm going to send the plan, I'm going to send a message, I'm going to send this off to myself. Send. And I'm going to cheat a little bit in this video. What would normally happen in the quote request process is that sends off, it ties it to this quote request, as you can see. That would send off, the recipient would get the email, they would open it either in a portal or a Buildxact account, choice is theirs, and the price comes back into here. The way I'm going to cheat is I'm going to go in and view, and I'm going to pretend as though they've just called me with a price and I'm updating it for them. Purely, for example, most of the time the price is going to come back normally from them. But I'm going to say $15,000. Anytime I actually modify it for someone else, it wants to know, do I want to notify them of this? And I always do. I think it's great to keep paperwork like this. So I'm going to choose that winner, and the choice from here is, now what do? Do I want to variation it straight away to my client, or do I want to purchase it? And I'm just going to show you the different ways you can manage this. You'll notice that within the quote request tab, once you choose the winner, there's actually buttons here to do the next step, which is perfect if it's just one item, straight into the variation or straight into the order, off you go. Again, you can also go from actual costings, and this method of selecting items in actual costings is better if you're going to get that quote request and tied into a variation with several things, or tied into an order with several things, which is also possible. The other reason I'm going to jump into actual costings is to show you something else. When the quote request is chosen, we highlight this blue estimate total. And as we've said in other videos, blue always means click on it. So click on that, it'll tell you there's a related quote request. Now I can see original budget 10,000, accepted quote request 15,000. If I go in variation from here, or quote request and variation using the button in here, it's going to do the exact same thing, which is refund the initial line and charge for the new line. The net effect is, because there's an initial budget of 10,000 and a new quote request of 15, the client's on the hook for the difference in this case. So I'm going to quickly put this one through. Joinery difference. You can do whatever you want with markup but I'm leaving mine as 0 for now. And again, this video is not really about variations, so I'm going to skip a few steps here and go to accepted. As the variation gets accepted, we're going to then input kind of the receipt lines. So we're going to have a line to refund the initial 10,000 and a line to make that change as a result of the new 15,000. So if I'm going to then go purchase order, I'm purchase ordering off the $15,000 line to either purchase order it or go through and receipt that cost. So that's the example if I had an existing budget. That said, there's definitely going to be times you get to this point in the job and you go, well, I need to quote request for something I didn't consider. How do I do it? And again, the principle is the same throughout the job section. If the line exists in actual costings, you can grab and start from the buttons down the bottom. If it doesn't, you go to the home screen for that task, in my case, quote requests, and there's going to be a create new button there. So for me, I need to do what I'm calling a standalone quote request, i.e. there's nothing that exists to do with this before this request. Landscaping, you'll notice it looks a little different because you're kind of building this from nothing. Next, select plans, and this scope and description is always the same as any other quote request. So as discussed, send it off to whoever. It might be multiple landscapers, it might be just one. Send. Now, as I did before, I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I'm also, in this case, going to go show recipients and view this one and actually input the price. Again, normal practice would be that you wait for this person to reply and the price that they give you comes in here. But I'm going to go costings, which is normally where I would see their price anyway. I'm going to say landscaping is 7800. Save and close. Do I want to notify the person that I've modified it for them? As always, I think this is a great idea. And I'm going to choose this winning quote request. Now, what this does, from here I can, as with the previous one, I can go and variation it, I can go and purchase order it. With this landscaping example, this is something the client's kind of looking into and whether they want to do. So what I would probably do in this case is grab and variation it and put this to the client, so send it out to them with any markups, proposing this landscape change. Then if they go and accept it, we accept the variation as per normal and we go through and purchase the landscaping costs and incur that. Hopefully this makes sense as far as where the quote request fits in the process, and really that it's just you asking for prices and it fits in between, you know, what you'd normally have with your existing budget and your purchase orders and your variations, and it's just another piece in the puzzle. As always, with any questions, let us know. We're happy to answer questions. But hopefully this is really useful for you guys, and hopefully the video has been informative. Thanks a lot.